Rich by Napoleon Hill. Here's some intriguing facts about it. Originally, the book was published in 1937, and surprisingly, by the latest record in 2015, Think and Grow Rich has sold over 100 million copies worldwide. How this book was created is quite fascinating. It was created by a man named Napoleon Hill who interviewed and studied the habits of more than 500 of the richest men and women, many of them who started life in poverty with little education or influence. It took Hill over 20 years to compile all the knowledge and wisdom from these interviews into a book containing 13 main principles of how anyone can change his or her way of thinking and become rich. So, without further delay, let's begin. Hill demonstrates the power of thoughts and how it has the power to shape your life, and in this chapter it sets itself as the foundation of the book. One of the greatest strengths of this book that I've always appreciated was how Hill used real life stories with the lessons. Let's take a look how the power of thought comes into play. There's a story about a man named Darby who became one of the most successful insurance salesmen in the country, and he used to share a powerful life experience he had with the gold rush back when it was booming. He went there with his uncle, and after weeks of labor, they suddenly struck gold in the midst of their mining. In the beginning, things looked great. It was so successful they brought a drill, and then afterwards something unexpected happened. There seemed to be no more gold left as they continued to mine further into the ground, and they continued to drill on, desperately trying to pick up any gold, but unfortunately there was no sign of it. At the end, they finally decided there was no use of trying to mine anymore, and so they quit. They sold the machinery to a junk man for a few $100s and took the train back home. But here's where the story gets interesting. The junk man who bought the machinery called in a mining engineer to look at the mine and do a little investigation. An astonishing discovery was made by the hired engineer that the project had failed because the owners were not familiar with fault lines. And even more surprising was his calculations showed that the gold would be found just 3 feet away from where Darby's had stopped drilling. And that is exactly where they found all the hidden abundance of gold. The junk man took millions of dollars of gold in from the mine, all because he knew well enough to seek expert counsel before giving up. Now, let's observe what happened from this story. Napoleon Hill points out that Darby and his uncle thought there was no gold left, so they thought there was no use to continue on and gave up. On the other hand, the junk man thought about not giving up on the abandoned project, went the extra miles, and at the end reaped success. Hill demonstrates success comes to those who are success conscious. One of the common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is overtaken by temporary defeat. In fact, one of the main weaknesses of mankind is the average person's familiarity to the word impossible. To add to this lesson, the 21st Century Revised version of Think and Grow Rich provides a modern example about Steven Spielberg, one of the all-time greatest motion pictures directors. There's a funny story in the movie industry how Steven actually broke into Universal Studio. Before he was famous or anything, Steven took a Universal Studios tour, which enables visitors to take a good look inside at the movie business. Steven somehow snuck off from the tour group and hid until the tour ended. When he left, at the end of the day, he said a few friendly words to the gate guard. Afterwards, day after day, he went back into the studio for 3 months. He walked past the guards, they waved at him, and he waved back. What's funny is he always wore a suit and carried a briefcase, letting the guards assume he was one of the students with a summer job in the studio. He got to the point of becoming friends with the directors, writers, and editors. He even got to become friends with the head of the production of Universal Studios' television arm, and one day got to show the director his college film project, which impressed him so much that he placed Steven under contract with the studio. Over the next few years, Steven directed several movies including the popular Indiana Jones series, Jaws, and later directed Jurassic Park, which became a hit at the time as one of the most successful movies in history. And what we just saw with Steven Spielberg becoming a movie director dominated his thoughts so much that he went beyond what others would do, sneaking into guarded buildings to get the chance to become friends with the directors. Remember this lesson: in order to achieve something great, your thoughts have a great effect on your actions and habits, which ultimately has an effect on your outcome. This is why it's important to change our minds from failure consciousness to success consciousness. So before we continue to the next chapters, question for you. Assuming wealth is what you want to accomplish, are you determined enough and willing to try harder to achieve it no matter what and how many times you'll face adversities? Think about that. A long time ago, a great warrior had to make a decision which ensured his success on the battlefield. He was about to send his armies against a powerful foe whose men outnumbered his own. He loaded his soldiers into boats, sailed to the enemy's country, unloaded the soldiers and equipment, and then gave the order to burn the ships. Addressing his men before the first battle, he said, "You see the boats going in smoke. That means we cannot leave these shores alive unless we win. We now have no choice. We win or we perish." At the end of it all, they won. Now, why did I tell you this story? It's because every person who wants to win in anything must be willing to burn his ships and cut all sources of retreat. Only then you'll be sure of maintaining the state of mind which is essential to success, known as a burning desire. Now, last time we learned about the importance of thoughts, which deeply ties with today's lesson of Napoleon Hill's first step to riches, which is desire, the starting point of all achievements. You're gonna want to pay close attention to what's coming next because reality is everyone wishes for money, but Napoleon Hill states that wishing alone will not bring money. That's just wishful thinking, unless you have a true burning desire. Without desire, there will be no motivation or cause for action. Having a burning desire will produce a greater chance for yourself to create wealth because with that state of mind, like the great warrior who ordered to burn the ships, winning the battle became an obsession. When you reach that state of mind, you begin planning on definite ways and means to acquire riches, backing those plans with persistence. Here's 6 practical steps from this chapter that Hill puts together that was approved by Andrew Carnegie and Thomas Edison for directing your desire into reality. Step number 1. Fix your mind on the exact amount of money you desire. Step 2. Determine exactly what you intend to give in return for the money. Step 3. Establish a date you want to have it achieved. Step number 4. Create a definite plan for carrying out your desire and put it into action. Step number 5. Write out the exact amount of money you intend to acquire and what you're willing to give in return for it. And finally, step number 6. Read out your statement out loud twice daily. As you read, see, feel, and believe yourself in possession of the money. Remember, for true success, desire is crucial because wishful thinking will result in frustration. And it is this desire that catapults you into action that brings results. Desire pushes you out of your comfort zone because when you desire something, you will not sit idly without doing everything possible to attain the object of your desire. I want to finish off this chapter with an incredible true story that happened with Napoleon Hill's second son, Blair Hill. Blair was born with no ears, and the doctor said to Napoleon that the child might be deaf and mute for the rest of his life. Despite what the doctors told him, Napoleon's reaction was a silent vow deep in his heart to find a way for Blair to one day be able to hear and to speak. He thought of the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson as, quote, "The whole course of things goes to teach us faith. We need only obey. There is guidance for each of us, and by lowly listening, we should hear the right word." So, what was that right word? Napoleon said his word was desire. More than anything, he wanted his son to be able to hear and to speak, and he was incredibly determined to transplant that burning desire into his own son as he grew up. One of the greatest things Napoleon did was creating bedtime stories for Blair with themes designed to develop in him self-reliance, imagination, and a keen desire to hear and to be normal, as well as to establish the of belief that his affliction was not a liability, but an asset of great value. Blair progressed through the grades despite having poor hearing and went out to pursue advanced education at the University of West Virginia. And one day he got the chance to try hearing aids, but he never found a device that worked for him. He didn't give up. His desire was still in him. So later, in his last year of college, he got to try out a different hearing aid which was specifically designed for him by another hearing aid company. The hearing aid proved to be absolutely perfect for Blair. He was so excited, he immediately telephoned his mother and he was overjoyed to hear her voice perfectly. This was the most important turning point in Blair's life, and for his and Napoleon's dream of normal hearing and speech was now fulfilled. This burning desire is what eventually led Blair in bringing hope and a practical relief to thousands of deafened people and expanding the hearing aid company. This forever changes limitation into a priceless asset of value, not just for himself but to multitudes around the world. What Blair learned from his father always stayed with him, and that lesson was every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. Remember, in anything you want to do, desire is the starting point of all achievements. Just imagine yourself, dressed up sharp, standing before one of the biggest, most powerful, influential investors in the world, and you begin to feel your heart rate climbing. The environment around you feels like it's slowing down, but you take a deep breath and you try your best to look calm and collected, dialed in, 100% focused on the man in front of you. You begin to think to yourself, this is it. This is the moment I've been waiting for. You know that the presentation of your business idea that you've created has the potential to bring value to yourself and many generations ahead. And you're standing there before one man, hoping he'll be interested enough in partnering with you. Now, just before you do anything, a thought appears in your head. Some call it doubt, some call it uncertainty. It starts to question you. Do you really think you have absolute belief that you could achieve this? Great. Now what? That was a heavy blow to your self-confidence. As you imagined this, you might have felt like you were in the show Shark Tank, but this actually happened in the year 1900, based on a true story of Charles M. Schwab meeting J.P. Morgan. What's awesome about this story is Charles M. Schwab successfully uses the second principle of Think and Grow Rich. Let's take a look and see what happened. Hey there, welcome to the second step to riches of the 13 Steps to Riches series, where today we'll be diving into chapter 3 of Think and Grow Rich. We'll get back right away to Charles' exciting story, which you get to learn how he used the second step to riches that dramatically impacted the advancement of the United States into what it is today. It surely wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for this important principle. So then, what is the second step to riches? It's actually called faith. Why, according to Napoleon Hill, of having faith so vital and so important to be part of one of the steps to riches? In the previous video, we learned about having a burning desire as one of the steps to riches. For a burning desire to come true, you must have faith that it is possible and that it will come true. Napoleon said, when you truly have faith in a desire and believe it will come true, it starts manifesting in its own physical self. If you really define the word faith, it means having complete trust or confidence in someone or something. It's absolutely essential to have confidence in something that you're actually doing to reach your goal, especially during hard time, because other times losing confidence will make you quit and that's game over. That's why it's important to know how to practice positive visualization, which is shown in one of the famous quotes from Napoleon Hill that it's from this chapter as, quote, whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. Here's a simple example of that. When someone sees himself in a negative way and communicates negative beliefs to his subconscious mind, he will end up living a negative life. On the other hand, someone who is positive always sees himself as successful and visualizes his desire being fulfilled will have a greater chance of eventually reaching success and a wealthy life. Okay, now let's get back and see how this principle worked for Charles M. Schwab that led to the formation of United States Steel Corporation in the early 1900s. Schwab had developed an idea based on interactions of various competing steel mills to unite them all under a trust of one unified corporate structure. To make this opportunity work correctly, there needed to be a massive influx of capital investment and a unification of all the other steel mills, and he became focused on one man that has the power and capital to help him create this. His name is J.P. Morgan. Keep in mind, there were many others who came before this man with their business ideas, but he would just ignore them. But Schwab was able to take this idea, have faith, aka complete trust or confidence in his idea, and present this idea to J.P. Morgan. His ultimate faith in his idea and in himself marveled J.P. Morgan. From this, the United States Steel Corporation was born. It later became one of the largest steel producers and largest corporations in the world, and Schwab rose to a position of power, fame, and riches. So, if you find it is hard for you to have faith, the answer revolves around the third step to riches using an effective technique which will be in the next chapter. Again, remember this: whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Hill believes if you want to achieve whatever you want in life, you must first see it in your mind and then absolutely believe in it. Whether you believe you can or you cannot, you are right. Did you know the subconscious mind is like a giant file library of all your memories? In fact, this is the place where all your choices are determined on how you respond to life and how you make important decisions. Strong emotions such as fears, desires, and urges all stem from the subconscious mind, which largely affects how you see the world and your place in it. If you compare the power of your conscious mind to your subconscious mind, your consciousness is extremely limited compared to your subconsciousness. The conscious mind is only a small fraction of your mental capacity that governs your awareness through the 5 main senses such as sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. The subconscious mind is where all the majority of your total mental capacity is used for registering everything behind the scene. And this is where the magic happens. Take a look at this. The brain is incredibly complex. It's consisting of about 100 billion neurons, making on the order of 100 trillion connections. It's incredible to know how your subconscious mind is always on autopilot even when you're asleep. It's constantly maintaining your physical body, such as your organs, and your natural or learned tendencies for better or worse. Now, why is this all important? In the previous video, we went over an important principle of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill called faith. There's a very strong reason why sometimes we do not believe in achieving our own wishes, despite even though we want something, we do not believe we deserve it. In other words, we lack faith in achieving our goals. Well, in this chapter of Think and Grow Rich, according to Napoleon Hill, what you need to learn next will help you increase your belief and help you train your subconscious mind to attain the success you want. How do we really do that? It's by applying the third principle of Think and Grow Rich called autosuggestion. You see, autosuggestion is an effective technique shared by multitudes of wealthy individuals that Napoleon Hill interviewed during his 20-year journey. Interesting, right? Well then, how does this principle work? You see, as we talked about, your life is experienced mainly through your 5 senses, which is sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Hill says that all these 5 main senses contribute to the formation of new thoughts, which later gets processed and filtered by your consciousness before it enters into your subconscious. The conscious mind serves as an outer guard filter which either lets your thoughts pass or be rejected before entering in your subconscious mind. Once the thought reaches into the subconscious mind, it gets planted like a seed and cultivates over time, ultimately influencing your behavior, emotions, and future actions. Napoleon Hill notes that in order for thoughts to make it into the subconscious mind, it must be mixed with emotions or feelings. The reason being is your subconscious mind mind only recognizes and acts only upon thoughts that have been well mixed with emotions or feelings. Here's an example of that. Just imagine you are a thought bubble, waiting outside in a single file line with the other thought bubbles, all trying to get inside this subconscious VIP club. The only way to get inside that club is if you go through the front entrance, which is heavily guarded by security guards. Those security guards work with the conscious mind department, checking if you have a pass. If you don't have a pass, you get the boot. So what exactly is that pass? You probably already guessed it. That pass is a feeling or emotion. If you have it, you can go right in. Still wondering why this works? Try to remember any past social event that you went to. Perhaps a childhood memory or something that happened to you a few years ago. Chances are you don't exactly remember everything that was spoken word for word between whoever was there with you, but you will always remember the feelings and the emotions you experience. Now that you're starting to learn how the mind works, here's where autosuggestion comes in. As written by Napoleon Hill, no thoughts, whether it is negative or positive, can enter the subconscious mind without the aid of autosuggestion. Autosuggestion is essentially a self-suggestion technique that will take effect over time as you continuously practice it. To do autosuggestion, you need to first do step number 1. Always focus on your ultimate goal by frequently looking at your written statement of your desire, and then close your eyes and speak it out loud. And then step number 2, as you're doing this, it's important to see and feel as you're already in possession of your goal, saying it in detail with gratefulness and passion. And then step number 3, repeat this at least twice a day every day, once in the morning and once at night. I suggest taking a minute to meditate to quiet your mind down so then you can then decide what your mind should focus on. Now there's a couple of practical ways I will share with you how I really like to do this, so stay tuned to the very end because you're not going to want to miss out. Now over time, as you continuously practice this, it starts to feel a lot easier to believe in your goals as your subconscious mind is getting newly implanted thoughts from autosuggestion. It will begin to align its direction towards your desired goals. It's ultimately tuning your mind to see and hear things related to your thoughts you planted over time. Here's an example how this works. Think of the time you got your first car. Now try to remember what was it like a week later after owning it. Okay, now think about this. Isn't it interesting that you suddenly begin to notice all the same car models like yours on the road, where beforehand you never really noticed them? Why is that? That's because your subconscious mind is now aligned and tuned with that car model due to your emotional connection with your car. That's how autosuggestion will work for you too with your implanted desire. You'll begin to notice new opportunities that you weren't aware of on how to create wealth, but now you'll start to see them as you practice this technique. Once you spotted new opportunities, from that point the next step is critical for taking action, which we'll talk about in the next video. Now here are some very simple practical ways of how you could actually do this. The first way is using personal affirmations. This is what we just talked about. You can use your phone, computer, piece of paper to write down your goal and have it where you can clearly see it every day. You can do things like having a background wallpaper on your computer or sticky notes on the bathroom mirror. The second way is using reminders, which one of the ways to do this is using your phone. You can set up a daily reminder to remind yourself to think about your goals. Reminding yourself several times per day helps train your brain refocus on the right things. And the third way to do this is using vision boards and posters. This is one of my absolute favorite ways of doing this. Having a vision board, picture frame, or a poster placed somewhere in your house where you could always see it, such as in your room, will help you ingrain your ultimate desire into your subconscious mind. The year was 1919 when one of the richest and most famous men in the United States of that year was in a court trial. This all started when a Chicago newspaper published editorial statements of Henry Ford, calling him an ignorant pacifist. Many people believe that because Henry Ford left school early at age 15. They thought he had little schooling, therefore he must not be a man of education capable of running a successful business. As you can imagine, Henry Ford was furious upon reading the statements and publicly objected. He ultimately brought a lawsuit against the newspaper that later took place in Mount Clemens, Michigan. Really quick, who was Henry Ford? Henry Ford was an American automobile manufacturer who created a Model T in 1908, which actually looked like this. It was the first car to be sold for very little money, making it easier for the general public to afford cars to travel from place to place. And he went on to develop the assembly line, which was an amazing way of having faster and more efficient production in factories, which revolutionized the automotive industry. As a result, the Ford Motor Company sold millions of cars, and Henry Ford became a world-famous business leader. Mr. Ford, would you please come up to the witness stand? The attorneys for the Chicago newspaper had Mr. Ford place himself on the witness stand, for their intention was to display to the jury that he was indeed a man that lacked education. From there, Henry Ford was bombarded with a variety of academic questions, all of which was intended to make him look uneducated. Questions after questions. Who was Benedict Arnold? How many soldiers did the British send over to America to put down the rebellion of 1776? Mr. Ford replied, I do not know the exact number of soldiers that the British sent over, but I've heard it was a considerably larger number than ever went back. Eventually, Henry Ford was fed up with pointless academic questions. He leaned over, pointed his finger at the lawyer who's been asking him questions, and said, if I really want to answer the foolish question you've been asking me, let me remind you that I have a row of electric push buttons on my desk, and by pushing the right button, I can summon to my aid people who can answer any question I desire to ask concerning the business in which I'm devoting most of my efforts. Now, will you kindly tell me why I should clutter my mind with general knowledge for the purpose of being able to answer questions when I have the people around me who can supply any knowledge I require? The courtroom fell silent. Everyone in the courtroom realized what was just said was not an answer of an ignorant man, but an answer of a man of education. Hey there, really quick, if you made it this far in the 13 Steps to Riches series, I want to congratulate you for being so incredible and hungry to learn more. Thank you so much for joining with me. Also, quick reminder, if you haven't gotten this amazing book yet, then honestly, what are you waiting for? You could always start this book for free thanks to Audible. Definitely check it out. Alright, let's get back into the video. Have you ever heard of the phrase, knowledge is power? Do you agree with it? It might seem obvious that it must be true when you first hear it, but the reality is this. Finding a vast amount of information is available everywhere these days, especially by a simple search on the internet, and yet, there's still a few in the world that are financially successful. Could that mean that the phrase, knowledge is power, simply isn't true? Well, not really. Napoleon Hill says there's a better way to say it, and that is, knowledge is potential power. You see, Napoleon Hill highlighted an important point in the beginning of chapter 5 from Think and Grow Rich as, quote, knowledge becomes power only when and if it is organized into definite plans of action and directed to a definite end. From what Napoleon Hill gathered from his interviews with the wealthiest individuals during his time, same thing applies to money as, quote, knowledge will not attract money unless it is organized and intelligently directed through practical plans of action to the definite end of accumulation of money. Alright, that's quite a lot. So you must be thinking now, where can I find this kind of knowledge that attracts money? Where do I start? It first starts with the understanding of the two different types of knowledge found in the world. So buckle up and hang on because you're going to find a lot of value to what's coming next, so pay close attention. There are two kinds of knowledge. One is called general and one is called specialized. And when it comes to producing money, one of them will produce far more wealth than the other. So let me ask you this, which one do you think produces more money? As you think about that, let's take a look again at Henry Ford as an example. He left school sooner than most at age 15, meaning he never went to high school, so his path of education didn't play out the same like the general public. Yet, he became one of the wealthiest men during his time. How did that happen? One simple answer is because his success wasn't found. His success was created using one of the two types of knowledge. You see, successful people in all callings never stop acquiring specialized knowledge related related to their major purpose, business, or profession. Those who are not successful usually make the mistake of believing that gaining knowledge stops after they finish school. And just because Henry Ford left school earlier didn't mean his education stopped. Did you know if you break down the word educate, it is derived from the Latin word educo, which means to draw out, to develop from within. School has its own important role for learning valuable information that can later assist you, but once you completed school, you must understand that whatever profession you choose to get into, you will have to accept the truth that a full lifetime of learning and developing yourself will never end if you want to provide value to the world with your own business or profession. So really, you need to understand that Henry Ford, for the most part, focused on acquiring specialized knowledge instead of just general knowledge. It's important to constantly learn and get better at understanding new relevant skills as technology and everything else is always evolving. Like Henry Ford, if you find something you can get better at, something specific and in demand, this sets yourself apart from the crowd to be in a better spot of being more in control of charging a higher price for your services or products because the demand is higher for your specialized skills. And here's an interesting example. In today's time, university career advisors reported that recruiters who come to their campuses, get this, are chiefly interested in hiring students who have studied in a specialized field such as business management, computer science, mathematics, chemistry, and other areas that prepare them to move rapidly into productive jobs rather than the liberal arts students who typically have a broader but unspecialized skills. Isn't that something? As you're starting to see, Henry Ford learned to self-educate in the areas where he can gain specific relevant information, aka specialized knowledge, that he was most interested in learning and using what he learned into real practice to advance his own career and future business. Oh, one more thing, take a look at this. Now, will you kindly tell me why I should clutter my mind with general knowledge for the purpose of being able to answer questions when I have the people around me who can supply any knowledge I require? Now, did you catch that? Napoleon Hill wrote, as quote, "Through the assistance of his mastermind group, Henry Ford had his command all the specialized knowledge he needed to enable him to become one of the wealthiest in America." Again, did you get that? The mastermind group. What is that? That is something very important that you'll learn a lot more in another chapter in the book, which is a very powerful principle to help expand your business to greater levels. A quick example of this is with Andrew Carnegie. As you might know, Andrew Carnegie was famous for his steel business, so he was extremely wealthy, but he stated he personally knew nothing about the technical end of the steel business. Moreover, he did not particularly care to know anything about it. The specialized knowledge he required for the manufacture and the marketing of the steel was by leveraging through the people of his mastermind group. More on that in the future videos. Now, to make this chapter applicable for yourself, first of all, decide on the sort of specialized knowledge you require and the purpose for what is needed. Second, determine the purpose of the knowledge you are seeking. Then learn where this particular sort of knowledge from reliable sources. If your goal requires you to go back to college, then consider it. But if you can learn it yourself, do it. Do it with the intention of gaining the practical knowledge that is needed from dependable sources to help you where you want to be, as discussed in the previous 4 chapters. Again, remember this from what Napoleon Hill learned from the wealthy. As knowledge is acquired, in order for it to become powerful, it must be organized and put into use for a definite purpose through practical plans. Question for you: what kind of specialized skills do you want to develop and improve on so you can create more value, which will eventually attract more money in the future? Let me know in the comments below. Up next, stay tuned to the next principle that will be in the following chapter called Imagination. The year was 1888 when an old country doctor drove into a town and quietly slipped into a drugstore by the back door. For more than an hour behind a prescription counter, the old doctor and the drug clerk whispered quietly. Afterwards, the doctor went outside and brought back a large old-fashioned kettle and a big wooden paddle. Wow, so this is it? Yes sir, this is what I was telling you about. The clerk inspected the kettle, reached into his pocket and handed over to the doctor exactly $500. The doctor in return handed over a small slip of paper that had important instruction that was needed to get the syrup in the kettle to start boiling. Later on, as the clerk began to use his kettle with the secret formula, he decided to add his own additional unique ingredient to the kettle, which caused the kettle to start gushing out gold. At first, unknowingly, what he added into the kettle was something very special, which not only brought great fortune for himself, but it also changed our entire world. Are you curious to know what exactly happened? Let's find out together. Coming up. What you just saw was a glimpse of the fifth principle in action from Think and Grow Rich, which changed a young man's business into a life of riches, and it can change yours too. We'll get back into the story of the enchanted kettle, of what happened next, so you're definitely not going to want to miss that out. Now that we're in chapter 6 of Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill starts by having you observe the history of the human race. Think about it. Think about how much we have accomplished with so many extreme challenges and how we brought ideas into reality that were once deemed as impossible. Napoleon Hill wrote, as quote, "Ideas are the beginning points of all fortunes. Ideas are the products of the imagination." That's right. The fifth step to riches is imagination. As Hill calls it, imagination is the workshop of the mind. This is where ideas are conceived that later can be converted into practical plans of action, which ultimately can create wealth. So then, how do we utilize this principle? Napoleon Hill shows us in this chapter that our imaginative faculty functions into two forms. The first form is called synthetic imagination. This is used most often and commonly for arranging old concepts, ideas, or plans into new combinations. The second form is called creative imagination. This is used for creating something from nothing. It's like creating a never before unheard of original idea. This usually happens when you get quote unquote inspirations or hunches from what Napoleon Hill calls infinite intelligence. This also could be known as inspiration from God over the course of human history. Creative imagination was used by many great leaders of business, industry, finances, and by great artists, musicians, poets, and writers. Now, you shouldn't assume that synthetic imagination isn't as useful because it does have a ton of uses. Napoleon Hill is just saying you must keep in mind down the road you may face circumstances that require you to think outside the box, which can demand the use of creative imagination. So, to make this practical for beginners, Napoleon Hill suggests starting out with developing your synthetic imagination. For example, if you want to learn how to create wealth, look for ideas that have been proven to work and try it yourself. In other words, arranging old ideas and concepts into your own business. Later on, when you start to gain experience, you can start exploring with creative imagination by adding your own twist and original ideas to your own business that can help it become more unique and appealing. Lastly, Hill says the more you explore your synthetic and creative imagination, it works like a muscle, so it will develop better and become more alert over time to newer and better ideas. Creative imagination may not always occur, but it happens spontaneously. There are many stories of people that had spontaneous ideas from a random dream they had or while they were taking a shower. So if this ever occurs to you, you should immediately write down the idea to bring it one step closer to reality. Now let's get back into finishing the enchanted kettle story to see how this principle worked. Whoever you are, wherever you may live, whatever occupation you may be engaged in, just remember in the future, every time you see the words Coca-Cola, you'll know that its vast empire of wealth and influence grew out because of this principle. That mysterious ingredient the drug clerk Asa Candler mixed in with turned out to be imagination. When Asa Candler applied this principle, new ideas of how to distribute and market a drink began to overflow from his mind that the doctor never thought of before. Examples of what he did is he came up with a variety of unique marketing strategies like using bright red Coca-Cola banners in streets, cars, newspapers, and he even made sure delivered Coca-Cola barrels were colored bright bright red to grab people's attention. And he was the first to come up with the idea of using coupons for a free glass of Coca-Cola at bars. This all proved to be super successful. And now Coca-Cola has created a giant ripple effect that made thousands of jobs and business opportunities to people all over the world. This all started because of ideas conceived by imagination. Napoleon Hill wrote as, quote, "Our only limitation within reason lies in the development and use of our imagination." Up next, stay tuned to the next principle that will be in the following chapter called Organized Planning. I want you to imagine this. You begin to open your eyes and suddenly realize you're in this medieval castle surrounded by your most trusted knights, nobles, and counselors, all of which are surrounding a large table with a battle plan map. You then realize they're all waiting for you to say something because after all, you are their king. You then look down and ponder a bit on the map as you observe your army's pieces as well as your enemies. As your warriors are planning, you begin to ask yourself, will this plan really work? Out of nowhere, one of your soldiers run into the room. "My lord, I'm afraid I have some dire news. Our initial plan has been compromised for the enemy has appeared from the east." That isn't very good. But then another thought appears in your mind. We're simply gonna have to counter with a new, better plan. You immediately stand up and boldly tell your people, let us not be swayed with discouragement, for this isn't a rejection ending with failure, but instead view it as a simple redirection towards a new victory. And so, with everyone encouraged by your uplifting words, all got back together in creating a new plan. You know, if you ever played a game of chess, what are the odds of that exact same thought coming across your mind? This brings us into chapter 7 of Think and Grow Rich, in which Napoleon Hill talks about how one can achieve extraordinary success through the 6th principle called organized planning. Back in chapter 2 of Think and Grow Rich, we learned about the 6 definite practical steps as your first move in translating desire into money. And if you remember, one of those steps is the formation of a definite practical plan or plans. So, in order to obtain your desire of, let's say, creating wealth, Napoleon Hill starts this chapter by making it very clear that whatever plan you make, you will eventually need to collaborate with others, much like a king does with his trusted warriors. No individual can make it entirely on their own, but a plan devised with your people can outstand among others. So then, how do we really approach this? Well, this goes with a quote that Hill said, "Every plan you adopt in your endeavor to accumulate wealth should be the collective creation of yourself and every other member of your mastermind group." The mastermind group. Remember back in chapter 5 when we first learned about Henry Ford and Andrew Carnegie having masterminds? Hill shows that you must associate yourself with other people to create a direction and put your plan into action. And he calls this group of people the mastermind, which he also dedicates a whole lot in another chapter later in the book. So to start this mastermind, Hill recommends following these 4 simple steps. Step number 1. Ally yourself with a mastermind group that consists of people who can help you carry out your plan. Step number 2. Before assembling the group, you need to determine what you can offer them in return for their help and cooperation. Step number 3. Meet with the people at least twice a week, or more if possible, until a solid plan has been created. Step number 4. Maintain good relations between you and the group at all times. Now then, this brings us to the next point in the chapter, which mentions how just because you finish crafting a plan doesn't mean that plan is going to work. Just like the king with his warriors, their first plan was compromised. There's going to be bumps along the road, with many a times those initial plans failing. But Hill also states that the process of planning must be continuous and persistent, as, quote, "If the first plan you adopt does not work successfully, replace it with a new plan, and if the new plan fails to work, replace it in turn with still another, and so on until you find a plan which does work. Even Thomas Edison, who's known for his 10,000 failed plans before he perfected the light bulb, once said, temporary defeat should only mean only one thing. There's certain knowledge that there's something wrong with your plan. If your plan fails, go back to the drawing board and keep refining it until a plan works. Now, the rest of the chapter goes into a variety of detailed practical guides that Napoleon Hill dedicated a lot of his time into this book. So much so that made the chapter over 40 pages long. The main ideas from these guides are about many things such as rendering important useful services, which is a lot about adding value to others into the world. There are important topics such as 11 qualities of a leader, 30 causes of failure in life, and 28 questions you should ask yourself annually to gauge your progress. I highly recommend reading through them by yourself and apply some of the knowledge he brings out. Up next, chapter 8 will dive into the 7th step to riches called decision. If you're enjoying this series so far, please drop a like, that would really help a lot. And again, friendly reminder, you can start this book right now for free thanks to Audible, link in the description below. I'll see you in the next chapter.